And the big worry with hardwoods is it's such a tiny little stem. You know, mice and voles, that type of stuff, they'll browse on the stem of it and they'll actually girdle it, or you'll just have trees or a deer come along and, you know, a little hardwood with a couple little stems on it, the deer snips that off and it's just gone and done. So a lot of times when folks plant hardwood, what you want to do, instead of having like 1 or 2 year seedlings, you'll actually get 4 year stuff. They're almost 2 feet tall. They're more expensive. It's a couple bucks per seedling. You'll actually plant them, and then what a lot of people will do is maybe use chicken wire is an okay way to do it, but I mean you can end up with your branches growing out through and stuff, or they make tree tubes, so they're about 1 meter tall, a little bit over 1 meter tall, and what they are, most of them that you'll ever see, sometimes they're yellow, mostly they're blue. It's just a tube like this, and it's kind of see-through. It lets all the UV light through and everything, and so the tree gets all the light that it needs, but it actually trains the tree to grow because it can't go out at all. If a tree can't go out, they want to grow towards where they're going to get light. So if they can't go out, they'll go up, and they'll actually grow up faster. So they'll put these, it's just like some type of plastic tube on there, and they need to stay in that tube for a couple years. So you think you're going to put the tree in the ground, you need some type of stake to go right beside it, wrap the tube around, tie that off, and then it's going to have to stay like that for a couple years. The nice thing with the tubes is they do go brittle after a while, but you can probably get a couple rounds of tree planting with them, as long as, I mean, you're going to have limbs come off and break a few off, and like, you know, if you get a really cold winter, sometimes they'll get a little bit brittle and that sort of stuff. But off here, so this just becomes like a good little spot that we can kind of start to look through for some opportunities to do some maybe small scale silviculture work that you can do on your own woodlot. Like, you're not going to hire somebody to come in and do these types of things. So if you look up behind here, what we get going on, you can see kind of a bit of a patch of, there's a bunch of fir, there's a bit of wild raisin and stuff in here. But what you get going here is we actually have a couple white spruce. And like I say, white spruce growing in under a hardwood stand like this is something that they will last a little bit longer. They'll, even if they don't last that long, they'll more than double what these firs are going to do. So these become ones where we don't need to go run through here and cut all the fir down or anything. But as I walk along, I'm going to see a couple spruce trees here. And this becomes a good chance if somebody brought loppers or anything like that in, or like a little handsaw, or yeah. Okay, well, I got 2 spruce, and it's not ever a problem to have 2 good crop trees growing side by side like this. If you walked around through, like, you know, a bit of a native woodland, a lot of times the 2 biggest trees, they're growing right together side by side. So, but you just want to make sure you try and give these ones some room. So in a spot like this, we've got, you know, a smaller fir here, and there's actually a couple spruce back here. Also, I might cut one of those, but definitely with the fir, like I say, you just get the loppers, run through. There you go. It's just that simple. And I'm sure everyone can kind of see, so there's 2 more spruce trees here that are growing really, really tight together. And I'll actually cut this one off. So the one on the left is growing a little taller. This one, not that it's a big problem, it's growing a little bit squirrely in there. They're both equal. That one's growing nice and straighter, and it's a little bit further away from these 2 big ones. So I'm going to cut that one. But it makes it a little bit easier to see through parts of your woodlot. It's a bit of a beautification sort of thing too. And what I like to always do as I'm cutting them, instead of just letting my trees fall wherever, I like to make nice little brush piles and stuff. It can simulate like a top out of a big tree falling or anything like that. When you get a nice brush pile, it becomes good habitat for mice or anything. A big brush pile would be good even for snowshoe hare or something like that. So the small brush, you know, with a hardwood overstory and everything else, it's not going to dry out that much. You're going to maintain some moisture in here. Okay. And the biggest thing I would always say, and I always tell everyone, is we definitely have, I mean, obviously look after this year, we definitely have forest fires in Nova Scotia, and we're going to expect more as we get warmer and drier. But the cause of the forest fires is always the same thing. It's 99% human cause. So the biggest thing you can do on your property is control access to it, and don't go out there yourself. Don't burn brush. If it's like, even looking at the burn map and stuff, if you're in a yellow zone and you know you got a bunch of big brush piles and it's pretty dry and you're looking, I wouldn't burn brush on my own lot. If I could kneel down and stand back up and my pant leg isn't a little bit wet, I'm not going to burn anything ever. Yeah, well, if you had just a big spruce tree fall and it hit right down on the ground, sure, couple of years, and then they start to go rotten and they actually become less of a fire hazard, and they actually help you a little bit because they're going to hold moisture and stuff, right? So yeah, it's all in the setting. But the big thing, we get a lot of questions, especially after hurricanes, about that. Is it's human caused. Is usually we just don't get lightning strike fires. So for a fir or a spruce tree that sells as studwood, doesn't matter if it's got a bunch of little knots from branches or not. If it's straight and meets the right specs, it's going to go, and it's the same grade no matter what. So to prune a bunch of spruce trees is not going to make you any money in the long run, and also opens up the chance because when you prune, it is a scar, right, so you're opening up the chance that you could have. The thing when you're pruning on these is you don't want to leave. I've seen it in the past. You see it a little bit here. Even like you have the longer stubs. When you prune, like I say, you're making a scar on a tree. So we want to have a scar that we can grow over as fast as we possibly can, so that you're not opening it up where insects can get in, or you might have some rot or something like that. So like these small little ones, that tree's got to grow, an inch or more in diameter before it's going to close over those. But if you want to come up, maybe a couple people at a time, if you come up close and look, we always say we want to prune so that you think of a branch as being round, you want to make a cut that's round. So like if I'm doing this one, I don't want to make a cut like this. So you can see that's a lot bigger scar versus if I cut it nice and flush. So that's a nice small one. And now if you look at this, that becomes just a long branch that's probably not going to heal over that far. I mean, obviously you're going to have to let it come out that far. So what you always want to do is try and prune at what we would call the branch collar. And if you get in close on the tree here and look, you can actually see where it comes down, and then the branch actually starts to swell a little bit, and you can actually see rings kind of growing around there. So that's like that good wood that's there kind of waiting for when, because naturally these will shade off too, and as they shade off, that branch collar will grow in really quick. So what you always want to try and do is cut right at the branch collar and make it as nice of a good flush sort of cut as you can. It's not too bad. And you see I got that right at the collar. That tree only has to grow it a little bit, and that wood that's in the collar, you see the little.
Yeah, okay, it's like.
Yeah. I mean, on a fir like this, really what you're pruning it for is so that these branches don't grow. Bill likes to run through with the four-wheeler and everything. You don't want branches whipping you in the face, so you're going to want to cut these off. And I mean, on a fir tree, you might just cut the whole thing down and throw it in the woods. But say this is a nice white spruce, or maybe it was a little hardwood and it had just a couple branches sticking out there. That's kind of what you're going to want to do is, exactly that. And I would say, like on young trees, especially if you're pruning them not for like a crop tree improvement sort of thing, just cut the branches that you need to. So we get those couple there, just like that. I talked an awful lot here, so maybe we'll leave the pruning for a little bit, and we'll just kind of, if everyone can take a chance with whatever we got for loppers, the little hand pruners and stuff, you can actually use the pruning saws, like I was saying, on a few of the little bit bigger fir trees and stuff. Especially the really light ones like that, those are great for cutting the trees down and stuff. So you can do it with the hand saws, you can do it with the longer pruning saws or anything, but these will cut nice and fast. And you can see his bill's going through. If I just stand here and pull that a little bit, it opens the kerf up some, and then I can get it to where it falls down. We leave as many dead trees as we possibly can. Alright, there we go. Yeah. And that's perfect. Like those make it hard, especially when you're cutting on that side. You couldn't get in any, but that's perfectly fine like that.
This one was spruce, for example. I would cut this one and that one and leave that one, even if it's the smallest one. Because the fir, I know we hate on fir a lot, but it is a more boreal species, and it will do worse and worse as the climate changes. It doesn't like warm weather, so we're already seeing it start to decline. And in the next 50 years, they won't live very long. No one's going to be upset if you cut down a fir tree.
No way.
In a stand like this, so this is actually a stand that eventually, like I've said, crop tree pruning is actually a funded treatment as of right now, and it might be something you try and do in somewhere like this. And this is a nice young stand of hardwoods, and we don't have a great history of managing for good quality hardwoods in Nova Scotia. We'll grow hardwood pulp for firewood, but don't think about saw logs, where hardwood saw logs are actually the most valuable thing you can have. They're bought on grade, so you need to have nice, clean wood under the bark. So by pruning when they're young like this, as they keep growing, you get nice, good quality wood there. Typically for a crop tree pruning, if you're actually doing it silviculturally, you want to see everything be 10 meters or taller, and we're pretty close to there. I'd be hesitant to prune in this stand just yet because you have to prune to 16 feet, and if you look at the live limbs on these, you're going to be leaving a little bit of a small live top there, so I'd like to see these trees a couple meters taller before we ever try and do that. But that doesn't mean as a landowner you can't look and say, okay, well, I'm going to do a crop tree pruning there someday. Well, why not get started right now on the lower portion of your tree and not let branches like this one grow and become that much bigger that when you do actually go through and do the full pruning, it's just that much bigger of a scar to heal over. So the biggest thing to consider when you're pruning in trees like this, and I alluded to it a little bit up kind of standing in the parking lot, is you don't want to just jump in nice and close to the tree and start cutting these off, because that's not a huge limb. But say it was a little bigger one leaning out there, if you just start cutting from the top when that falls, if you're not careful, you could tear. I've seen bark torn down this far, then you get a big huge scar. You know, you're trying to do a good thing and you've done worse by the tree, both for the health of it and for good quality. So so what we always do on a limb, I always say, and maybe if everyone could try it today, the best thing to do is to come out a little bit on the limb, and I'll just do a little bit of cut, like 1 or 2 pulls, and you can see I don't even have to get a big cut in there. That's enough to break the bark on the bottom, and then I'll come a little bit further out on the branch and just make a few pulls, and that'll break that right off of there. And now you're all right with this one. There's not enough weight in that anymore for that to fall over and actually pull any bark off, so then you don't really have to start from up underneath. And it's still the same pruning technique. So you can see, like on the hardwoods, that branch collar really starts to swell out there, and if you could get up close and look, and we'll look at a few lower ones, like maybe I'll do this one with a handsaw. You want to cut right at the branch collar, and you can see how that branch is growing up on almost like a 45. That's where you want your cut to go, is with the same one. Like if I cut that straight down with the bowl of the tree, I'm going to create this really big surface area that has to grow over it. The tree has to take more effort to grow over that scar, whereas if I cut this way, and you have to be careful, the back side of your blade now is not so bad. The trees are starting to go dormant. The bark's pretty, like it's on there pretty good. If you were trying to do this in like July or something, that sap's flowing, the bark's really, really easy to knock off, so you need to be super careful with it. There you go. So I don't always feel like you need to take every limb off. Like for me, if I'm looking this one, over here, you might not be able to see it from the top side. It's a pretty big limb, and it's growing up at such a weird angle that it's like, for me to get in and get that cut off, I'm not going to get a nice flush cut. Sure, if I brought a ladder out, like you see the apple picking ladders and stuff, if you ever wanted to, you could. But for me, I wouldn't worry about that one. I wouldn't bother with it. I might come up and these nice small little limbs there, with a good sharp saw like this one, you can just give it one quick little pull and away it goes. And I mean, even if you never come back and prune any more of that, the absolute most value you can get out of a hardwood tree, if that's your goal, is to grow logs, is going to be in that first 8 feet, and we've got that pruned there. So what'll happen is, say these maples grow for another couple of years, they get a little bit bigger, and that limb will come out, and all of a sudden it starts to rub on the side of that tree. So that's something you can watch for too, and that doesn't even have to be because this is a good sawlog tree. Maybe it's the only sugar maple in the stand, or it's just a yellow birch that you want to see because we want this to turn back to an older forest, which would be more yellow birch, sugar maple, maybe a bit of red maple and stuff in here. And if that branch is rubbing there, it's going to create a scar. Then it's a chance that you could have insects come in. If you get dead wood there, that becomes a weak spot in the tree. You'll often see them snap off right there, anything else. So you might come in and just trim a few branches off just because you have what we would call it mechanical damage, so just rubbing of anything like that. So you might prune for that reason too. I say our general rule is you want to have 1/3 live crown. So you look at these trees and say they're about 10 meters tall. I should have at least 3.5 meters of good live crown. Anything after that, these lower ones, they're not catching very much sunlight down in the lower canopy and stuff. So if it's for anyone going out on your woodlot, I'd stay maybe a little bit closer to even half live crown. If you're not super anxious about it and you know you're going to walk through here again next year and the year after that, don't feel like you got to prune it up to 1/3 just because that's kind of the general rule that we use. There's no worries about having half or something like that too. So.
I wish I had my hard hat on.
Take a bunch of like small.
Somebody else? Is anybody
We're always out and we go and do crop tree pruning work. Why can't we do this all year? It's the nicest thing. You're not like running the saw. There's no bugs yet. It's not hot. It's just like kind of this type of temperature, perfect. Especially after a long winter and you're starting to get that nice sun. You're working in a t-shirt for the first day, and it's just quiet. You can like. I never listen to anything. Some of the guys that throw headphones in, listen to a book or a podcast or something. You just go for the whole. We'd work like 10 or 12 hour days nonstop, but it's just the most enjoyable thing. So, yeah.